Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz vocalist and pianist Joanna Wallfisch. She grew up in London in a very musical family. She is the daughter of a classical cellist, Raphael, and violinist, Elizabeth. She is promoting her newest 2016 album called Gardens in My Mind. It includes folk, jazz, contemporary, and indie pop music to create a textured tapestry of an entire album. In addition to singing, she plays the piano and the ukulele. She made her way to New York City in 2012 and has gone on to tour and work with the likes of Wynton Marsalis, Fred Hersch, Lee Konitz, Rob Garcia, and so many others. She opened up about her life in music, loving jazz, and being a girl that just needs to sing. So get to know Joanna and dig this interview, my friends.
Hey, thank you for taking some time out for me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go ahead and dive right in here. I know a lot's going on. You got your newest album, Gardens in My Mind, that's coming out. So along with the release of this new album, give me kind of an idea of what's going on with you lately.
Well, with the release of the album itself, I'm right now in the midst of booking my album launch tour, and it's taking shape in rather an unusual way in the form of a solo bike trip along the west coast of America. Bicycle, not motorbike. Yeah, I've decided this summer, mostly, well, for a few reasons, mostly because August is kind of a dead month everywhere. It's either everyone's at festivals or on vacation, and for me, I just decided to combine all of my greatest passions, which is basically adventure and music, do it all together at the same time in the form of my release tour. So I'm going to be traveling from Portland, Oregon to Los Angeles by bike.
Cool.
I'm carrying my ukulele and my loop pedal, and I'm organizing house concerts and any kind of performance opportunities along the way, very community-driven stuff. So, yeah, that is what you caught me in the middle of doing right this moment. So.
Beautiful. Well, let's talk about this album, which, you know, it's very clear you weave together the singer-songwriter kind of side of things. You got folk, you got jazz, you got contemporary, you got indie pop. How did you texturize this album in such a way?
Texturize it? Well, I guess it's very much a result of my whole life, like how I've experienced music my whole life, because I grew up in a family of classical musicians. So from dawn till dusk, it was just music everywhere. Strings. My father's a cellist and my mom's a violinist and my brother's an opera singer, and that side of this album has kind of been very much, it's just been in my system my whole life. And then when I was a teenager, I fell in love with jazz, listening to Ella Fitzgerald, and so I basically sung jazz for years and years and years, and I did a master's in jazz back in London before I moved to New York. And then coming to New York, that was when, like 5 years ago, when I really was able to establish my singer-songwriter side, where I was actually, it was kind of completely welcome to be performing your own original music all the time. New York is a very open scene for that. So this record is kind of, I feel like, a result of my evolution, like all of these elements just coming out. And it felt very natural to me to make this music. You know, if I try not to question it too much as far as what genre I am in, just go with the way it sounds and feels. Yeah, this is the result. String quartet, piano, and voice.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a great album. So you
Thank
grew
you.
up. Yeah, you grew up in London, and besides music being in your DNA, between your father being a cellist and your mother being a violinist, what was it about living and growing up in London that gave you such a great background in music?
That's a good question. I mean, I was born into, I guess, a relatively unusual situation, because it wasn't just my parents, but my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles, and we're talking both sides of my family. It's like a kind of musical circus. And I think London, it's an amazing city. I mean, I grew up sort of in South London. It's sort of suburby, but there was a constant influx of musicians in my house. Always, it was a very adult world, I guess, I grew up into. I was always going to concerts or had people rehearsing in the house, and so for me, I observed that it was very normal to have a completely wacky life, like that every day was different, that I might wake up and realize that my mom or my dad is on tour, or that I might be going on tour with them, or suddenly school letters are being written to the school saying, sorry, Joe has to go to Australia now because I've got some concerts to do and can't find a babysitter or something. So yeah, and I think London, it's a bit like New York, and it's a very historical city with tons going on. And but I don't know, like as a kid, I could have been living on the moon and had the same experience. It wasn't really until I was like a student and studying in London that I realized, oh, this is the city I'm from.
Yeah, that's cool. So you mentioned getting into jazz in your teen years, and I'm kind of focusing a little bit more on jazz because of the nature of what we do here with Neon Jazz in Kansas City. So my question is this: was there an album when you started kind of delving into the jazz realm that really got you going?
Yeah, I can remember the moment very clearly. I was about 11 years old, and I was rummaging in the gadget shop in Carmel, and I found Ella Fitzgerald and Joe Pass duo record.
Yeah.
And put that on, and I heard My Old Flame, her rendition of My Old Flame, and it's like, this is what it's all about. And then I followed that up with Rhythm Is My Business, which is an Ella Fitzgerald live record, and her version of No Moon at All just also made my heart soar. And so those are like the two records I listened to constantly from the age of 11, 12, 13. And then I fell in love with Sarah Vaughan. Just the kind of lushness of her voice drove me crazy. And those are my two singers, and then that followed on with Nina Simone and then Dusty Springfield, actually. Yeah, I mean, I would say really, I mean, even now, but like I spent a good decade listening to very little else but jazz, and especially those particular singers, and learning all of Ella's solos and all of her nuances and everything. So jazz is really where I've come from by choice. Even though I was born into this classical world, jazz is what I chose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being a pianist makes sense for somebody that came from the genes of someone that was a cellist and a violinist, but the uke tends to be kind of a skew off to the left of those classical instruments. How did the ukulele get into your musical diet?
Well, I can tell you, I mean, kind of by accident, and I will admit that although I play the piano, I wouldn't say I'm a great pianist. I can play the songs that I write, and I was a very rebellious kid. I hated lessons, so I always just made things up as I went along and didn't do any exams. And so when it came to the ukulele, I picked that up, I don't know, 4 years ago, and a friend of mine was playing it. It's very easy to teach yourself. It's very easy to travel with. And this was right before I moved to New York, and I was quite adept, having lived in Paris and various places, of busking, playing on the streets and stuff. And I was like, I need an instrument that I can accompany myself with, that I can travel anywhere, that I can pitch up at any point and just sing. And the ukulele seemed like the perfect instrument. And it's become a great companion for me. It's been an amazing instrument for me to write songs on and to travel with. I'll be taking it on the road in August on my crazy bike trip. So yeah, that's basically how it's come about.
Right on. So before we depart this magical land of childhood into your more formative years and your adult years, I want to ask you this. There could probably be a pretty strong assumption based on your history and your family lineage that you were going to get into music. But let me ask you, was it always music? Was that what you were destined to be in, or did you have other dreams as a kid?
Oh, yeah. It's not always been music at all. And actually, I mean, it has on the one hand that, like, it's just been there and I've always done it. But I actually spent my sort of from high school through to my early 20s, I did a fine art degree to begin with. I was a painter and illustrator and did a lot of children's book writing and stuff like that. But there came a point during my undergrad where it was actually when I lived in Paris where I realized that music really was the thing that I had to do, because I found a jazz band that used to play on the bridges of the Seine, and I started singing with them every weekend, and that was when I realized that I really have to sing. But I think because I grew up in this crazy family, and I've got two older brothers who were always so sure of what they were doing, that I felt under a lot of pressure that when I decided to do music, I knew it was going to be all or nothing, and I had to explore a lot of other options before I could do that. You know,
there's a lot of lessons in life that you learn outside of the classroom, but there's definitely constructs within the formal environment of a classroom. And you mentioned undergrad in Paris, and then you got your master's at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. What did you learn in a formal school environment that was very key for you?
I learned discipline. I learned a lot of things. Like, I learned that it really takes concentration, and like, as far as the actual the art of being a musician, there's so much discipline involved. There's so much just grind and practice. And I chose to go to school and do a master's in music because I needed to kind of have that enforced. But I also learned, like, because I've always written and performed by ear, like I always learned music by ear, and I was very lazy with learning how to read music. And so I actually went on to my master's course, partly being able to read music, and then suddenly having to arrange big band charts and do all this stuff. So there was a pretty steep learning curve. But I'm so grateful to it because, like, a year into that 2-year course, I remember sitting down at the piano and suddenly writing a song, notating it fully, and it was as if, like, a spell had been cast. Like, I didn't realize I could do that, but this whole lifetime of osmosis, music coming in through osmosis, and then going to school, everything fell into place. And now I'm completely, a full-time composer, arranger, songwriter, performer, and it's like, yeah, it was definitely invaluable to just go to school and do it the right way for once.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. You come from a very huge cosmopolitan place like London to another in America with New York City. Was there a big culture shock coming from London to New York, or did it seem kind of seamless?
There were definitely some things that surprised me, things that I wasn't expecting culturally. I mean, things that I love. For instance, I love how open New York is and how free, you can express yourself however you wish, and people are really in your face, and you're always getting into conversations with strangers, which I personally love. I think other people hate that about New York, but that's what drives me with New York. It's also exhausting. I mean, I think the in-your-faceness and it's very brash and impolite. But yeah, and then so I mean it wasn't. But then not so much culture shock, but just reality shock. Like, this is my new life, and then just figuring out how to build a whole community out from scratch in a city like this is a kind of, the reality of that is a shock in itself, because it's no easy feat. I think it's a lot easier to do it in a place like New York than London because it is so open.
So professionally, things have worked out pretty well for you. You've performed with Wynton Marsalis, Fred Hersch, Lee Konitz, a lot of people you've performed with. What do you learn from these kinds of folks that have been around for a long time?
Well, I mean, it's pretty surreal for me to have been able to sing with those people, because during my time at Guildhall, those were the people we were studying and talking about, and actually the reason I bought a ticket to New York in the first place, to see, like, what it's all about. And for me, for instance, Lee Konitz, I've had the opportunity to perform with him a couple of times, thanks to Dan Tepfer, who's the pianist I collaborate with a lot, who has a very long-standing duo with him. And with Lee, what I really learned is how you have to be just so true to the moment and try and drop the baggage of, like, all the things you think are pretty or cool or fancy. So whenever I've sung with Lee, I've just stuck to the melody and sung the song as simply and as purely as possible, and just thought really hard about space. So yeah, that definitely was quite an amazing thing to learn, and also just the sort of the long-standingness of these people. Like someone like Lee, he's history incarnate. It's amazing to be around him. And then with Wynton, I mean, he's a whole other kettle of fish. I got the opportunity to perform as part of his Abyssinian Mass tour, so I was singing with a huge choir and him. And he's a real preacher, if you like. Like, the way he talks in rehearsals, and he's so confident and like instills this amazing sense of joy and hope and like historical properness in jazz when he's talking about the music. So he's very inspiring in that, like, you can do anything all American kind of way. if that makes sense.
You know, his brother Delfeo came through Kansas City recently, and I'm fortunate enough to speak with him, and I think the Marsalis gene pool is real high on maintaining the New Orleans sound, but being very, very true to the American invention known as jazz. So I know what you're saying. It's cool. Yeah.
And for me, here I am, like this, white chick from London who comes into America as a jazz singer, and then I'm hanging out and performing with Wynton Marsalis, for instance, and it's like when jazz really is the New Orleans thing, and it's like that is just a huge education for me. And like, of course, you can read books and you can hear the music, but it's like when you're really in it and part of it, and next to people who are so intent on keeping the heritage true. That, to be honest, was an experience that taught me that I find it hard to call myself a jazz singer because what I do isn't that, and yet that has inspired me so much in what I do. And then Fred Hersch, well, I've just always been in love with his playing with Norma Winston. He's such an incredible musician and pianist, and singing with him, we've never actually performed together, but we've played a lot, and he's been a huge support to me and everything I'm doing, and it's like singing with him is like singing on a cloud. Yeah, it's pretty magical to have had these opportunities so far.
It's the soul of the organism that means the most when it comes right down to it. When you're singing, whether it's tracing into the jazz realm or other realms, if you got the soul, that's what means the most,
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
In the realm of jazz, since it isn't as lucrative as other realms of music, most notably pop and rock, you have to get involved with commercial campaigns and movies and TVs and whatnot. So you're in the national ad campaign for Hillshire Farms. So probably a lot of people have heard you, and they may not know who you are. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, if there are Hillshire Farm people out there, then they will have heard me. I'm only singing a few notes to the tune of R, but but I'm also my voice is also in a couple of movies out there. For instance, there was an independent movie called Pressure with Danny Huston that came out last year that I'm singing on, and it also features one of my own songs. Another British movie called Summer in February. I wrote the lyrics to one of their main theme songs for that. So my work is floating around the world in places that I have little control over.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very good. Yeah. That's very good.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. We're only as good as the shoulders that we have the chance to stand on half the time. And I want to know, are there any teachers that gave you advice that still kind of ruminate in your mind when you wake up every day or perform?
There are actually a few people from way back when I was about 17, 18, doing some jazz courses. One is Pete Churchill, who's a pianist and arranger from England. And I remember going on stage at this jazz course. I was incredibly nervous, and I got up, and I counted it in, and I counted in way too fast, and it was kind of a train wreck. And after that, he said to me, no matter what, just always take an extra breath before you begin. And I always do. I always go on stage, and even when I think I'm ready, just going to take one more breath and then be ready. And that is especially useful to me now that I do a lot of solo performing and I use this loop pedal. The timing is absolutely everything with that. And, if you're in the audience, you'll see me and you might have this awkward, like, what's she waiting for a couple of seconds, because I'm just remembering that advice. Just
wonderful.
Take a breath.
So, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So in the world of not only specifically jazz, you mentioned Ella, but in music, who would you consider your music heroes?
People who I think are incredible and really inspire me, like Bjork is someone, especially her later albums, I find very inspiring, and David Bowie as well, just because these are two musicians that have really just pushed all the limits and did everything that they could do. Presently, there are a lot of people in New York that really inspire me presently. Like there's a singer-songwriter called Becca Stevens, she's doing incredibly well, and I just love, her musicality is very strong. She's a real musician but also a real poet and great performer, and that I think is very inspiring. Young people who've come from this sort of jazz background, but are being a very independent kind of musician. Gosh, I listen to so many different kinds of music. I went to sleep last night listening to Stravinsky,
nice.
String music, and just. But then, of course, there's Joni Mitchell, and I'm actually in the midst right now of doing a big commission called Beyond Joni. I've got a concert in Connecticut in July where I'm performing the music of the female songwriters of the 60s. So Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez, Judy Collins, Judy Sill, Janis Ian, etc. And I'm arranging about 18 songs from about 10 different songwriters for a large ensemble. And but it's really a great thing for me as well to delve into these women, and it's specifically the songs they wrote really at the beginning of their career as well, and just seeing their own story and kind of how it relates to mine in this time, this era. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Let me ask you this. What is the nicest thing that a fan has ever said to you?
Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is actually someone I didn't meet, but it was when I was living in Paris and I was singing on the street with this band. And in the tip suitcase, there was a suitcase with roses in it where everyone put their money. And there was a note left for me in there by some passerby that said something like, "You sing with such joy that it fills, and it fills us all with love," or something like the love that you sing with makes us so happy. Something like that. It was this amazing kind of anonymous note of acknowledgement that, my joy, because singing is when I'm happiest, was really projecting out and making these passers-by just as happy. Yeah, that is always an amazing thing when someone expresses how you've touched them emotionally. It's always a good goal to make someone cry in a concert.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Why do you love jazz?
Why do I love jazz? Well, it's an amazing form of music. It's so human. It's so human. It's so many things as well, because jazz is some people hear jazz and they're like, oh, I hate jazz because it's totally inaccessible and just a bunch of saxophone players singing at their toes. Or I love jazz, or I hate jazz, or, oh, it's Diana Krall, or it's Ella Fitzgerald. Jazz is so many things. But I think for me, it's a real freedom of expression that I think I am also a very free-spirited person. So it's very attractive to me, like improvisation and collaboration. It's such a collaborative form of music as well. And it's fun. And people should stop taking it so seriously.
I agree. I totally agree. Let me ask you this. Everything's going to come down to this question. Everybody has a version of who you are, a perception of who you are, your family, your friends, your business associates, the fans in the crowd that hear you sing. But tell me, who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are? Pulled the New York out of me.
Yeah. Who do I think I am? I think it's pretty straightforward in a way. If I really strip all the kind of stuff down, I think I'm basically a girl who needs to sing. I'm a girl who needs to tell a story and to share this thing that I see as magic, like to be able to sing and perform. And I want to share this, let's say, gift that I think I've been given by my amazing family. And yeah, but I'm also a real adventurer, which is why I'm very restless, and I'm constantly creating things, and also the persona that I do put out online, I try and keep it as true to me as possible. Yeah, when everything's stripped down, all the glam and all the record releases and all the social media and all that stuff, I can tell you I'm happiest when I'm in the ocean or when I'm singing songs. It's very simple.
Right on. I like that. I like that answer. And that's a nice way to wrap everything up. Joanna, thank you for taking some time, opening up, and giving me your story. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in London, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that great jazz. And thanks to Joanna for her music, her story, and that time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com for all things neon jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
I would use my nose to smell this revelry.
Neon Jazz.